In part of this process of trying to figure out a proactive solution, because I haven't really heard anybody coming out and saying, you know, we're going to do this to protect the reefs, we're going to do this to protect the sheltered mangroves. Other than deploying oil booms, I haven't heard anybody coming up with really any new technology that can work in the water column, because we don't know. I mean, sure, oil booms and hair booms and, you know, hay and all these things, they work great at the surface, but we're probably not going to get it that way. It's probably going to come subsurface tar balls, and I haven't heard any proactive measures. The sheltered mangrove is very, very important. If oil gets back into the sheltered mangrove, it could be a potential bad situation, because as the bacterial populations, natural bacterial populations start to decay that oil, these environments are already low in oxygen concentration because they're not high energy environments. So as those bacterial populations grow, it'll cause the oxygen concentration to go down. If the oxygen concentration goes down, it can affect fish, it can affect invertebrates, and even the plants and the bacteria themselves. And this is how a dead zone is created. What can we use to keep those bacterial populations in check? Here's a new food source for the bacteria. They're going to grow like crazy. What can we use to keep those things in check? Well, one of the things that's been used in the past are these things called microhabitats. And they may have the wonderful ability to keep the bacterial populations in check. More or less what they are is, imagine a filter that's been seeded with baby sponges, baby oysters and mussels and sea squirts. These filter feeding organisms love to eat bacteria. As babies, you put them in there, you put this filter in, and as the bacterial populations grow, these things eat the bacterial population, and as they grow, they can simply be removed and put a fresh filter in with new babies. You can take that and dispose of it wherever you want, wherever you need to. An additional benefit that I'm very excited about is that, let's say we can't get to all the mangrove. Let's say we can't protect it all. Let's say we get slammed, okay, and mangrove starts to die. Okay, these microhabitats can be strategically placed to provide the necessary substrate nursery area for all these fish that are spawning offshore, and so they've already been proven to do that. And so, even if we can't stop all the oil from hitting in critical areas, we have an alternative that we could come in and put in until those areas get back up to par. And we can hopefully, you know, save spiny lobsters. I think we can do well for spiny lobsters. Some of the, you know, other species that, you know, the groupers and things that use the mangroves as their nursery grounds, snappers for sure. I mean, and I've got a lot of data on this. Mike Kalinsky is the inventor of this product, and it's really kind of timely, because the work that he's been doing is, he's been proposing to use these in places where mangroves have been removed for development, to kind of give the ocean back its natural filtration system. But, you know, here we have this natural disaster, and his product may have a perfect application for helping us mitigate the oil, mitigate oil-eating bacteria, and hopefully create nursery area, you know, for areas that are affected that can't be saved or protected. So I'm pretty excited about the plan. And so now what we're trying to do is we're trying to form a coalition that there are plenty of people with money that want to help. If BP doesn't want to help, then that's their prerogative. But we're going to continue to move forward and try and put some of these ideas in place, because right now I don't feel that there's any faith in what's going on out there. So what's happening now is, like, there's all these ideas, and they're starting to come together in kind of a really nice synergistic plan. You know, the air bubble curtains used to deflect oil into less critical areas, aerating the water, allowing the oxygen for the bacteria, these microhabitats as well. And now there's talk of using microbes, oil-eating microbes. One of my biggest concerns is, you know, if you spray some oil-eating microbes there and their population blooms, what happens to the surrounding dissolved oxygen in the water? You know, how is that going to affect, you know, so we're kind of working together a little plan here, you know, and one of the ideas that's come out is maybe we can develop these filters that, instead of, you know, we can just spray the bacteria right on. The bacteria are called sessile. They don't swim. So they hit a chunk of oil, and when they hit a chunk of oil, they grow on it, and they reproduce at about a doubling of every 20 minutes. So their populations can grow really, really fast, and that's why you have to be really careful. But if we can have these filters with sprayed on bacteria, you know, you put them in there, let them do their job, the filter, or maybe even the oil booms, we spray them on the oil booms and everything, so that when the oil hits it and you collect it, they start their process. Or maybe you have stationary oil booms out there, you know, with long curtains protecting a mangrove. As the oil starts hitting it, these bacteria start doing their job. And if you can't, you know, have someone there every day checking it out, you know, just eventually come in, pick up the boom, the bacteria have done their job, you remove them, dispose of them. I mean, there's a lot of ideas coming together right now, and I'm very glad. I have an opportunity to be optimistic now because I hear ideas and I see people moving together and instead of we're just going to do this and this old, you know, outside of the box thinking that can ultimately, hopefully, have some real positive ramifications for some of our more critical areas. I've always been an optimistic person. I'm going to remain an optimistic person, and we're going to move forward with a prepare for the worst and hope for the best attitude. Think about the bluefin tuna. Here's a critically endangered species that uses the Gulf of Mexico for its spawning grounds, okay? It's spawning almost in exactly the place where this thing is happening, okay? And when they spawn, what happens is the male will swim around the female and he'll bump her to the surface. When he bumps her up to the surface, she releases her eggs, and then he comes in right at the surface and fertilizes it with his tail. He mixes it all up. These eggs have big oil globules in them, and they float right up to the top, okay? They're going to be floating right there in the oil. Here is a critically endangered, the most valuable fish in the ocean as far as monetarily, and maybe even some could argue ecologically. They do play a significant ecological role. That's already critically endangered. Is this their last? I mean, what happens to them? I mean, I don't know if you can see around the office here. I have tuna stuff everywhere. I've even got some tuna eggs over there. These are tuna eggs. Okay, these typically will float right up to the surface. This oil will destroy them, guaranteed. I don't have to even worry about making conjecture on that because I know if they get in, they're pretty fragile as it is. So, you know, what happens to this species? This is one of my favorite species and one I've been working for towards trying to help the populations for a long time. That's just another example, you know, and not only all the migratory species, blue marlin, white marlin, all these fish have floating pelagic eggs that float right up to the surface. You know, what's it going to do? We're going to see the ramifications of this. Even if we never see a drop of oil, we'll see ramifications for a long time. I believe we're 37 days in on the oil spill, if I'm not mistaken. A lot has occurred since, you know, this first happened, and we're sitting here in Key West right now, and the oil has definitely entered the loop current. Just about everybody agrees that it's entered the loop current. Some models say very aggressively, and we may have just a matter of days before tar balls start washing up on the beach. Other models say, no, we still have quite some time. What the loop current is doing right now is it's pinching off, which is, from what I understand, not entirely uncommon, but it's forming a giant eddy itself. And that's great for Key West, or it could be great for Key West, because the longer the oil stays out there, the more chance bacteria have to break it down and things like that. However, not necessarily good for the pelagic species that I was just referring to, you know, the tunas, the marlins, sailfish, any of those guys that go offshore to spawn in those areas. They're going to have some troubles, and so I think we could see ramifications for years to come, especially with fisheries. I think fisheries are going to be the most affected in the long run. I'm happy to say that we may have some proactive measures that may help protect the coral reefs and sheltered mangroves down here in Key West. Protect from what? I mean, we're going to protect it from tar balls. I mean, what happens if the dispersants come and dissolved in the water column? You know, not really sure that we have the plans to deal with that, but I know that the first thing we need to do is just get out there and find out where this stuff is at exactly, to give us as early a warning as possible. I know that Mote Marine Lab is the one that's deploying the gliders down here. I think Georgia Tech is deploying gliders up in the upper northern Gulf. There was another institution that was deploying gliders as well. There's been talk, Rutgers has some gliders, and there's been talk of bringing some more gliders down to help with the efforts by Mote. And I know that these are things that are being done outside of BP. From what I understand, it's kind of difficult. You need a little standardization because the waters that are being sampled are different. On board, this technology on board is not as, let's say, accurate as a titration would be, or some kind of chemical test that you could do on a boat, you know, where you could get a water sample and you could test for it. You know, these gliders, they are battery powered, they're autonomous, they don't, you know, they don't have any person driving them, so you program them and let them go. So they're capacity load is limited.